Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new year. I am very excited today to be joined by my friend Kary Shumway, and today we're going to be talking about goal setting. But for Kary, for everyone who hasn't seen you before in one of the many talks you've joined here in Craft Professionals, you wear a lot of hats. So can you tell everybody, what are those hats that you wear in the craft beer world, and why are you passionate about setting goals for the new year?
Well, thank you, Andrew, for that wonderful introduction. I do wear a number of hats. So for me, my primary focus is financial training for the beer industry. So I'm a CPA by trade, CFO for a brewery, past CFO for a beer wholesaler. So I've been in the beer space in finance operations, a little bit of sales as well for the last 20 plus years. So that's my primary thing. I run a site called craftbreweryfinancialtraining.com. I also have co-founded taproomsuccess.com with a good buddy of mine. And that is a online resource that's for taproom managers and staff. We have a lot of training tools, which is super important. So those are just some of the things that I'm doing in the beer. Oh, and why am I excited about goal setting?
Why
Because
are you excited about goal setting, Kary?
I love talking about. I'm a planner by nature. I'm always writing stuff down and whatnot. And I just love, I really believe in the power of if you say it out loud and if you write it down, you're much more likely to actually achieve that thing. And then furthermore, being really purposeful about, directionally where you want to go. You always say, like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So how are we going to grow? We get to kind of choose directionally where we want to go. And then really it's just about setting the plans and the steps in order to get there. And it's easier said than done, but over the years discovered a lot of tools and tactics to help make that easier. And that's what
And we're
hopefully we'll
going
talk
to
about
dive
today.
into those shortly. And I think
Yeah.
so often we only talk about goal setting in quarter four of the year or just January of the next year. But it's so important to always have these goals, something that you're thinking about year round. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
Now, who should be setting goals? Our community of craft beer professionals, it's made up of everyone from the owners, management, brewers, to people who are working 2 shifts a week behind the bar. So when we're talking goals, Kary, who should be setting these goals?
Yeah, I think there's different approaches to it. There's certainly, you think about like, uh, top down goals, bottom up goals. There's different ways to approach it. I'm not sure there's any one size that fits all. I think the point is that you want to be thoughtful about where you want to go and then set some goals in order to get there and then fill in all the details in between. So, one school of thought is that the goals really should be set strategically by the owners of a company. If we talk about this, goal setting from a business perspective, so we really want to think about what are the top level goals for our business in the coming year. And then we can create sort of these sub goals that are going to filter down to others in the organization. So for example, if a large goal is we want to grow our taproom sales, for example, by 10% next year, we quantify that. Maybe we do some math to see what is that in terms of dollars. And then we think about all the little pieces and parts, like who can influence that number. We think about like key drivers. We talk about this a lot. The number of customers that come in, the amount that they spend when they come in. So how can we influence those things? How do we bring more people in, get them to spend more? We start brainstorming around that. Maybe it's marketing tactics to get our word out there. Maybe it's looking at the portfolio. Maybe we expand, our offerings. Maybe we add new merchandise, this, that, and the other. So setting the goal is one thing, to have maybe one top goal in that way, but then those sub goals for the people that are actually out there, trying to achieve those numbers. Because I do think we get caught in that trap a lot where goal setting is great, but very often it's just a number on a whiteboard or a number on a spreadsheet. It's not that it's not going to happen by itself. So we want to set those goals and then have those sub goals so that people can draw a bright line between what they do and how they fit into that larger goal.
So we're talking goals, sub goals, and I imagine you'll have these for each department in your brewery, whether you're talking tap room or brew house, whatever's in between. How many goals should you have and what's manageable?
Yeah, I think I start with, I think the one goal concept is good because it really focuses you. But you'd see like 3 to 5. It really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve, and how quickly you can get there. Sometimes you manage if you really just set one goal, one number. Boy, that's great. And what you want to try to do is create a meaningful outcome. So if you set a goal and you hit the goal, you want to be happy with the result, because very often you'll set a goal and maybe it's too easy and you've hit it, and what did we really achieve? Oh, good, we checked off a box. But so we really want meaningful goals. We certainly want to keep them manageable in the sense that what I've found over the years is that we measure lots of stuff. We tend to spend a lot of time just sort of finding numbers and adding them up, and that can take a lot of time and resources and energy. And what ends up happening is we sort of lose interest, like, oh, never mind, I'll hit that next month, and then we kind of forget about it. So we first want to just make sure this is something worth measuring. Then we want to keep it manageable so people will stay on top of it. And then make it something that you can actually quantify, because a lot of times we'll set a goal that's like, oh, I'd love to measure, and then it's like, wow, it's almost impossible to get a good, accurate, timely number on that, and people get frustrated.
So one thing you mentioned just now that was interesting to me is you said, say you set a goal and you accomplish it super quickly because it was too easy. Is there a formula for creating these goals, or how do you make sure you're setting a goal that's at a realistic but also challenging level to kind of make you, strive to be better?
Yeah, I think it's a little trial and error. I think the first is, just begin with the end in mind, right? Like what outcome are you trying to achieve? And then, work backwards and quantify it and see what works. And yeah, you're going to make some mistakes. I mean, I think that's the beauty of there's no harm, no foul. I mean, you set a goal, you hit the goal. Oh, geez, I made it too easy. We'll make another one. But you do get better and better at it. But I tend to look at it in terms of, if we look at it like through a financial lens, it's like, what outcome do you want? Say a sales growth, maybe it's, you want to increase profitability 10%. Well, that seems like a pretty decent goal. I mean, depending on where you're starting. So I would start with that and just say, like, all right, what feels like, and you can look at this in a historical context too. So if you were to say, is this goal, too big, too small? We want to try to find that, the three bears, right? Just right. We want that goal that's like, we're gonna have to push to get it, and it's not a layup, but it's not impossible either. We're not going to demoralize our staff with this number. I've seen that. Or we're not going to give them something that's like, well, what's the point of that? That's so easy, we could do that tomorrow. We tend to skew towards the harder ones, but I think what I would look at it is in historical context. So you could look back and say, have we achieved? We'll go back to the 10% sales growth. Has there been a time in our history where we've grown 10%? And if you look, maybe you've been open for 5 years and you look back and you're like, oh yeah, every year we grow 25. Well, then 10 probably isn't the. But if you look back and you're typically around flat or a couple points up, maybe 10% is a little too much. So I like to set the history. People are going to ask that question anyway. And they've often asked me, like, I'll set a goal and they're like, where'd you get that number? I say, well, historically, here's how we've done it. And here's what we think we're going to do in order to achieve this outcome. So I like to frame it up like that.
So we're in early 2023 right now. So if someone hasn't done a year-end review at their brewery, would you recommend they all come together right now to kind of do that review, but also formulate the goals for the year?
I think it's a good starting point because, again, I'm a big sort of frame of reference guy, right? I'm like, well, where have we been, right? To sort of set the stage for where are we going to go. And I think there's a lot of we forget things, right? We get busy. Time goes by really fast. Oh, it's a new year. Let's set some goals. So I think it's useful to, before we start setting all these new goals, is to really look at, what happened in the past year. I love this time of year for that. People do a lot of that. It's a great time for reflection. But if you do that reflection within some sort of a system, it can be as simple as pull out the calendar, pull out your historical sales, pull out your list of events that you've run. Pull out the list of new beers that you've launched or new merchandise items that and really just start by saying, what stands out, what worked, what was really cool, what drove sales, or what did people get really excited about? What are your customers still because those things are out there, but they just kind of fly by because, we're on to the next thing. We're on to the next thing. So I think doing a kind of a look back, that historical review is super important. Because you'll see things that maybe you're like, that's right, that event was amazing. We should do that again. So you can use that 80-20 analysis and say, what are some things that we did that had a really outsized result? They have really amazing, outcome. And, can we do more of those things? And the inverse is true as well. What are the things that we tried that were miserable failures? Remember, everybody hated that. We lost a lot of customers. It took us a while to recover. We tend to not forget those things. But if you look back, you may identify some things that worked really well, that you learned some lessons from, that you can then, roll forward to the new year. And then it's also a good reminder. We don't forget the negative things, but we do fall prey to them again and again. I see this where we've made a mistake. Wow, I wish we didn't do that. What went wrong? We kind of sort of know what went wrong. And then we go and we do the same thing again, maybe a year later. We forget about it. So I think that review is super important so that you can use that information to inform your goals for the new year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we're talking events right now. If you do an event that's a complete flop, well, why was it a flop? Was it the weather? Were you planning an outdoor event and only 10 people showed up because it snowed? Or, what factors contributed to why it didn't go as planned? I'm really, adamant about taking notes, having a list you can go back to review. That way, when you're doing your year in review and you're looking at something from quarter one of that year, why did that event go not as planned? Would it be worth trying again? There's certain factors outside of your control that may be different this year, and maybe it is worth giving another shot as you kind of brainstorm your goals for the new year.
Absolutely. And, I think it's interesting. That sort of post-mortem idea, I think, is super important. So what could happen is maybe you do an event, it really didn't work well. To your point, you go back and you sort of reverse engineer and say, you know what, we just didn't order the supplies in time. We didn't really train our staff. We weren't ready for that many people. We didn't have the tick, whatever the things are. And what those can do is not only say, yeah, let's not do that again, but you can improve your systems for that. Right. And you and I talk about checklists all the time. So any kind of major things within your tap room, within your brewery space, it's helpful to have a checklist as a reminder. We do it particularly for doing things sort of from time to time. You don't do them all the time, maybe. Even if you do, I think these things can be really useful. So maybe a checklist for your events. These are the major things. Let's learn from it, right? And then you update it. You're like, oh, we didn't have that thing on the checklist. Okay, well, you get better and you get better. But really, the way to avoid those mistakes and improve is to not only say, here's what went wrong, but how can we, and not only how do we avoid that, but how can we improve our systems so that these things not only don't happen again, but we're getting better, as we're learning as we go.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Checklists for an event like we're talking right now can be a huge tool to see greater success in the future. And as we're talking more about 2023 goals, or whenever someone's watching this, goals for that year, how do you recommend staying, organized with all the goals we create for ourselves?
Yeah, there's different ways to, the systems that I use are really just financial plan, business plan, SWOT analysis. So financial plan really is, what are our sales, margins, operating expenses, what bottom line do we expect out of that? And then kind of running through. So when we set these goals, they're usually then housed in the larger framework of one of these models. And so the goal itself is great. We want to grow 10%. We're going to do all these things in order to achieve that. Good. Now let's get that into the financial plan. If there are things that overlap into more strategy, let's say, we're going to open up a new tap room. We're going to do a whole new line of, so that really belongs in the business plan. So we really want to have an opportunity to sit down with our team, talk about where we want to go from a financial and operational perspective, and then once they're done, really capture those things in these different frameworks. So the financial plan will not only say, oh yeah, great, there's all our goals, but that's something you will look at every month as you're doing your financial review. Where did we think we were going to be, and where did we actually come in, and what are the deviations? And wow, we said we were going to do these things. Did we do them? Oh, we didn't. So it's an opportunity to kind of serve as a reminder. So those are the big ones. SWOT analysis, that's one of those things that people use it or don't, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
I think it's always a good brainstorming activity.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. I've seen it been like, oh yeah, whatever. But what I think is interesting is, and I tend to be a sort of a risk-averse person, so I'll do it in reverse. I want to know what the threats are. What are the threats that are coming at me? Other people who are maybe more, less worried about that would start with, what's our opportunities? That can be really fun. So I don't know that you have to go in order: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but you can kind of bounce around. And it is a great brainstorming tool, to sort of, and it's nice quadrants, right? So I like the way it kind of lays out with that. So you can really start to identify some areas of your business that need some attention, and therefore we set some goals around that. Maybe, I don't know, customers, maybe your training is a problem. You're like, we're getting repeated complaints or feedback from our customers that our training's not great. So, well, okay, let's do something about that. So take that feedback. Maybe that's a weakness. And then what are we going to do in order to set a goal, to improve training, for example. So those are different ways to do it. I think, writing it down is key. It's essential. If you don't write it down, it just isn't going to happen. And getting it on the calendar is super important too, because what happens is if you don't put it on, we all fall prey.
Kary, aren't writing it down and putting it on the calendar the same thing? I just type it on my calendar and now I have to do it.
I know. Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Like I think the calendar is really good for, things like these are deadline specific and we need to time block them. And then, maybe writing it out in more detail. What exactly, I know I'm time blocking, maybe, my taproom training time. Okay, well, what we're training on what? And so there has to be some sort of written document that sort of further explains, oh, that's right. We need training on this or whatnot.
Well, yeah, you can't just say we're going to have a meeting on training. What kind of training? There needs to be some sort of outline. The more you don't prepare for it, the more of a mess it's probably going to be. So it's important to be organized, know what you're getting into.
Exactly. So write it down or it's not going to happen. Get it on the calendar or it's certainly not going to happen. And we do tend to, fill up our calendar. I guess what I've thought about is if we don't put the important stuff on the calendar is going to fill up with unimportant stuff, or the day's just going to get away from us. So
do you recommend, any dedicated time weekly or monthly for teams to meet up to make sure they're staying on top of their goals and not forgetting what they thought of early in the year or late prior year?
Yeah, I think the frequency is really kind of up to, how important the goal is. Like what's your threat level in terms of, we have got to hit this goal or we may not be open next year. Okay, you probably want to meet every day on that. And I love that concept of sort of closing these gaps. So if we have a goal, where do we stand in relation to this goal at the end of the day? Well, we're not there. All right, what are we going to do so that we can close that gap tomorrow?
You make me think about like the visualization you'll see for like a fundraising campaign. Like, it's $0 to $500,000 and this is where we stand because you're tracking the progress. And, I think often it is important for people to see where you stand in reaching that goal because it hopefully is motivation to keep climbing.
Yeah, I think that's important, and it's a lot of these things are really simple techniques. We just kind of forget about them. And I think I read that, this is way back. It's like IBM days, right? And they, IBM, they're also smart way back then, but their primary goal setting and execution strategy was where do we need to be? Where are we? What can we do tomorrow to close that gap? That's pretty much it. And then you just do that repeatedly and repeatedly. It's really muscle memory. And now you're not like goal planning anymore. That's baked into your day to day. And it helps you develop that discipline. So I think the simpler, these techniques, the better, because we like simple things. I like simple things.
We like to make it easy. You want to make it accessible, easy. That way you can actually see action and feel like you're moving in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I think a lot of the conversation today, we've talked about, goals that are set by owners and managers. They start at the top. And obviously the people running the business, they have the initial vision. So they're probably going to create the overall goals. But, when it comes down to it, they're not the only people involved in, making sure we reach these marks. So I think it's very important that the team members also become aware of the metrics that we're trying to reach. Any tips for getting buy-in from entire staff? I know you and I talk a lot about, changes made to make a tap room more efficient, more profitable, more memorable. If, the owners and managers have certain goals for the tap room, how can they get the tap room staff, even those who might only be working a few shifts a week, excited about reaching these new levels?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably different ways to do it. I think the quote that I would use relates to kind of open book management, Great Game of Business, the book by Jack Stack, one of my favorites. And he basically says, when you appeal to the highest level of thinking, you're going to get the highest level of performance. And so basically what that means is, include people in your planning process, treat them like adults, treat them like business people, ask for their opinion and their perspective. And you're going to get some wacky stuff. I used to do this where we would run open book management in our companies. And at first it was like, boy, is this a good idea? Because you'd be asking people and they would tell you, and you're like, boy, that sounds like the weirdest idea I've ever heard of. But eventually it would kind of work itself out. And some of those weird ideas weren't that weird. They're actually pretty good. And then you create this system to kind of take in all this feedback so it doesn't become chaos. So I think my recommendation would be, including people in the process at first might seem like, boy, I don't know, that seems like it'd take a lot of time. And they don't really, they've got other things to do. These are all true things. So none of what I'm saying is easy. But I think the reward is pretty amazing because when you include people in it, they feel included, right? And when you feel included, you feel like you're part of the process, and therefore you're much more likely to get buy-in. It's not a guarantee, but I've certainly seen it work where people are like, oh, they're asking for my opinion. I'm giving it to them. They actually did something with it. So, you need to be, taking this seriously and treating people professionally. Education is a huge component of this because we can't just call people into a meeting and, start expecting them to solve all of the issues for the brewery. It's not going to happen, but we got to give them kind of, here's what we expect, here's some information for you to kind of digest. Here's what we'd love to hear from you. All this sort of advanced, basically an agenda. These are the things we're going to cover. We're going to go around the table, and Andrew, I really want to hear your perspective on how our taproom,
Thanks,
customers.
Kary.
Yeah, not really, not right now. No, just kidding. But that's the idea, right? You want to be treated like a partner. We always talk about that. Like, these are partners. This staff they're just not staff. They're partners. They're family members. Well, we'll treat them like that. But understanding that it is going to take a little time. So I think that's one way to do it that I've seen that's been effective.
No, great tips there. I think there's definitely value in being transparent with that information and data and letting your team know, what's going on with your company so they can help you achieve those goals. And also, when they take part in whether it's helping plan an event or making changes in the tap room or whatever it may be, they're going to feel empowered. They're going to want to see their goals hit for the bigger picture. And they're going to feel like they're part of, something greater than just working a few days a week, doing whatever they're doing. It's all about them, being part of what you've created and feeling like they're invested.
So true. And I know you've talked about this a lot in terms of sometimes, you do need to you may need to give a little bit of, if you want to attract some flies, you got to put out some honey type thing. So you may need to think about that as well. So you've said, like, just ask people, right? Like, what would be something meaningful for you? We'd like to reward you for coming and providing. So it can be both, right? In terms of asking what's important to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to understand your staff needs. We talk a lot about understanding your guest needs, but it's also important to create that customized experience for your team. And when we're talking about motivation, there's three kind of buckets that I like to put it in. People like rewards. People like, hey, whoever sells the most to-go beer on a Saturday afternoon, we're going to give you a $50 gift card to a local restaurant that everybody loves. Everybody likes rewards. Maybe they don't, but it's important to ask. People also like recognition, almost stereotypical gold star on a wall or just being congratulated in front of the team. Sometimes that really motivates people, just being recognized for doing a great job. And I think so often we're so busy in what we're doing, we just forget to tell people that we appreciate them. So I think that's important, simply saying, hey, Kary, you're doing a great job. Something as simple as that. Versus, not doing it. Do little things because it will make a difference and it can make someone's day. And one of the areas I think often breweries and businesses in general just lack, someone's working in your tap room, someone's working in your brew house. But what else do they want to do with their lives? Do they just want to shovel grain and mop floors for the rest of their lives? Or do they want to someday open their own brewery? Understanding their future goals and helping them out with maybe opportunities that help them reach them, whether it's, helping them go through the Cicerone program or sending them to some, brewing school where they can get certified in X, Y, or Z. Giving them the opportunity to grow is huge. Maybe they want to be your next taproom manager. You don't currently have one. Simply asking them can help you better understand their goals and make your achieving of all these goals easier because you've got someone who's excited to participate.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, because I think those are all ways in which you get buy-in. Is you demonstrate to people that you care about, not only their well-being and what's important to them from a reward standpoint, but also, maybe their professional development. Where do they want to go, and how can you get them there? And not everybody can be the taproom manager, but if they raise their hand, you can give them the training in order to get there. And maybe now you have a superstar, server that's, making more money and is, more fulfilled and whatnot. And then they're there when and if that position opens up. So I think that professional development's huge to get that buy-in
No,
as
I
well.
agree. So we've talked a lot today about setting goals, staying organized, getting buy-in. But Kary, how do we make them stick? Because we're creating these goals in January, but obviously goals aren't something we focus on for just the first couple months of the year and say, hooray, we got the goals. Now we can forget about them until we do the brainstorming again later in the year. How do you stay on top of these, and what tips do you have for making these goals stick?
It's pretty amazing, right? We set every year, it's almost a cliche. Like we set goals, we got all these resolutions, and then 3 weeks in, they all go to hell. So I think there's lots of different ways, but three that come to mind. One is to really create some scorecards that are front and center. So if you have goals and you can quantify them, just use that simple. We want to grow 10%. Keep that front and center on a regular basis. We want to do the opposite of out of sight, out of mind, because that is what happens with resolution. We're all excited right now, and then in a few weeks we get distracted with other things, and whatever that resolution was, we'll remember it in August and go, damn it, well, maybe next year. So if we have a scorecard that is front and center, that's updated regularly and communicated to the people that can make a difference and help achieve that outcome, that's going to be super important. The next is just time. We do get distracted. So I think this next thought is one way to sort of try to be thoughtful and purposeful about eliminating distractions. For me, the biggest problems are email and my phone. So if I can do two things, when I want focused work, shut off the email and put that phone on silent, or shut it off, or put it in a drawer, it's amazing how productive I can be. So that's one just sort of simple thing that I'm sure we all fall victim to. Like, oh yeah, let me just check that email real quick. It's a killer. We know it
My
is.
favorite part of the day, and it's not related to work, is when I want to spend time with my family, literally leaving my phone in the office so I can focus on other things. The reverse can be said when I want to focus on work, but it's very, very helpful not having that distraction prevalent.
No doubt. And then another, next level is to think about something you and I've talked about, which is, and I attribute it to different people. Tim Ferriss is the one I hear it from the most, is eliminate, automate, delegate. So things that come across your desk, or if you're at a taproom manager, the bar or what have you, things that you're dealing with, run them through this filter. Is this something that you can eliminate? Do you need to be doing this at all? We're constantly getting people coming in asking for, I don't know, donations. Can we eliminate it? No, we should do donations, but I can't have this interaction. So can I automate it? Yeah, I can automate it. Let's put a button on the website, say, I'm sorry, or here's a QR code, just do that. And then the third one is, can I delegate it? Well, I can't automate it. I don't really, I'm going to delegate it. We have a person here you're going to talk to, and they're going to help you out with that donation, for example. So really what it's trying to do is say, time is a real finite resource that we have. There's lots of things that we do every day that are sucking time, that have nothing to do with the goals that we've set. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, that we set these goals, we have the best of intentions, and then we just lose our handle on time management. So when stuff comes in, can we eliminate it? Maybe you can't. Can you automate it? Maybe you can't. Can you delegate it? Maybe you can't. But you're at least running through that filter. And I think what you'll find is, yeah, why am I doing? I can't eliminate or automate or delegate that thing. So I think those are pretty important. And the last thing I would say is, this is all in the vein of, when we set those goals and they're really important and we really need to hit them, we need systems and discipline to make sure that we're staying on track. And Zig Ziglar is he's a sales guru from back in the day, and he's got all these books on tape. They don't really do books on tape anymore exactly, but and so one of the things he says is, as you're moving about your day and you're working on different things, he says, look at what you're working on and you're saying, does this move me closer to or further from the goals that I say I want to achieve?
Oh, that's good, Kary. Can you say that one more time?
You're sitting there working on something and you say, is this moving me closer to or further from the goals that I say I want to achieve? And it's amazing. You'll stop in your tracks. You're like, This has nothing to do with the goals that I set. And in fact, if I look at my calendar, I have not 1 hour of one day spent on the things that I say is most of it. Isn't that amazing? So it's like one of those things that just kind of a real quick, hard reset. And you got to do it pretty regularly because it's like, oh, yeah, I remember. And that'll work maybe for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours or maybe a couple of days, but you need to bring it back. So those are things that I think about. And you don't need to spend all your time bringing yourself back to your goals, but I think those are going to help you kind of get off of the merry-go-round of just the day-to-day stuff and really focus on what's most important.
No, tons of great insight today, Kary. And for everyone listening, I hope you've taken notes or want to go back and get those tidbits of wisdom that Kary dropped on you. And Kary, looking at goals, what are your goals for the year? We talk about setting business goals, but is there anything this year personally or professionally you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, there's two main things I want to do. And I'm not sure you and I have talked about these, but maybe we have. One is that I'm starting a new finance association for the beer industry. So I think it's really important now more than ever, financial training, because it's tough out there. Sales have always been tough. The market is getting even tougher. We're still kind of dealing with all of these side effects from the last couple of years. We've got lots of inflation, we've got labor pressures, we've got supply chain issues. None of this is getting any easier. So one of the ways to help make it easier is with financial training, and not only just the training tools and but it's interacting with others who are in the same situation as you. So that is the goal, is to bring people together really under the umbrella of, let's talk how we can improve our financials collectively. How do you do your budget? What metrics do you look at? What's your process for this, on and on. I think that's so important to have people to lean on, and not just me saying, hey, guess what? Here's how that's fine. But, people often will learn better from kind of peer to peer. So I think that's goal number one. And goal number two is, I wrote the Beer Business Finance book many years ago, and I would like to do it again for the craft brewery folks, very specific to that. So that is goal number two for me for next year.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see your progress in those and excited to hold you accountable through check-ins that we're going to have throughout the year.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you will.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing so much insight today. And one final question for you, Kary. You and I talk books. We love to learn. What are you reading right now that you'd like to share with everybody else?
Books. Well,
all those fake things I have behind me that, make for a great backdrop on, camera.
I love them. So in the context of sort of goal setting, so we'll keep it in that realm. The first thing, I find is that we do when we're setting goals, it's really hard to know where to start, right? Because we're like, well, it could be this and it could be that, and it could be, and we maybe set too many. So maybe just think about one thing. So here's a book for you to think about. The One Thing. I know
it's a little blurred out right now, and
here we go. How's that?
It looks good right now.
Okay, so it's The One Thing by Gary Keller. Very simple process. And he's got a great quote in here too, which is, I think this is his. The quote goes something like this. What's the one thing that you can do that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? Isn't that such a great quote? So there's probably one thing that you could do, but I don't know what that is. But the book sort of walks you through some steps to find out what that might be. Think about like the power of that. It's like, wow, I found one thing that's going to have this huge exponential effect on my business and whatnot.
Well, it sounds like the one thing you need to do right now is read that book.
I would read that book. So I'm going to hit you with a couple here. I hope we have time for this.
Let's do it.
Okay. So the next, people have brought this up before. I'll bring it up again. Traction by Gino Wickman. It's a good system for goal setting that not only you can set the goals, but you can disseminate them to your team, and you can stay on track with them. It's got like nice little, time markers in terms of how to do all these things. The next is a favorite that I brought up before, and this is a business plan book. The One-Page Business Plan by Jim Horan. Very simple. One of the things I've found with business plan that drives me crazy is that these plans are like 60, 80, 90 pages long. No one wants to read that. You're not going to read that. You're not going to do anything with it. One page is sufficient, because all we really want to know is where are you going to go and how are you going to get there. That's the beauty of this book. And you can really do it in one page or thereabouts, maybe two. The last one, I'm going to hit you with a little bit of a curveball. I don't know if you've probably read this one. It's called The E-Myth.
I have.
The E-Myth Revisited. So a lot of these are books that I've read, but you reread these, and these are all dog-eared and marked up. But the E-Myth really talks a lot about systems, and we've talked about systems quite a bit today. But this really just sort of re-emphasizes how important it is. Like you could have just the greatest beer and the greatest people and this, that, and that, but if your systems stink, it's hard to have a successful business. So this book really kind of dives into, how to kind of deconstruct that, how to put those systems together so that you can achieve the outcomes that you want, whether it's financial, operational, great customer service, just running a great business. So some very, very cool stuff there.
A lot of really great recommendations today. And, I love reading as well. And I think having books like you've mentioned, just something you go back to from time to time, it just keeps you thinking what you can do to make your business more successful, and the strategies that these authors give and Kary gives today, they're designed for you to see greater success.
Yeah. And half this, I would say probably 99% of the stuff I'm rattling off today, I don't come up with any of that. I read it and then you sort of, internalize it. And maybe it comes back out as something that makes sense to me.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. You talk about the finance organization you're going with right now. We can read textbooks all day long. We can listen to lectures, but when you're in a room with other people, whether it's virtual, in person, you're sharing success stories, you're learning from one another. It's much more interactive, and hopefully you can soak in something that they're sharing and either apply it to your life or, find something that they're doing successful and pass it along to someone else who it could benefit. There's so much value in sharing information, whether from books or just these conversations, which I love so much.
It's so true. I do as well.
Well, Kary, before we sign off, if anyone is looking to learn more about you wearing the many, many hats we've gone through today, how can they reach out to you?
Best way to find me is craftbreweryfinancialtraining.com. If you want to email me directly, it's Kary@beerbusinessfinance.com. And I'd also love people to check out, particularly if there's taproom managers, taproom staff, check out taproomsuccess.com. Pretty excited about this. A lot of training tools there for folks, a lot of free resources as well, some pretty cool blog posts, I think. So taproomsuccess.com is a cool place to reach out as well.
Well, Kary, it's been a great time chatting with you. Good luck to all your goals for the new year, and for everyone listening, stay accountable and good luck hitting those marks as well. We'll see you soon. Cheers.